On Friday, I told you about how the church in Germany, led by its National Bishops' Conference and by the will of a laity who had had the Sensus Catholicus crushed by modernism, is on the brink of schism. A well-known German bishop agrees and warns that the church in that country faces another situation with a Martin Luther type if this is allowed to persist. Get ready, folks, because things are getting bumpy for the faithful in that country. They need your prayers now more than ever in most of our lifetimes. The bishop in question is not one known for his orthodoxy and his allegiance with the pillar of tradition in the church, but is rather known as a Benedict XVI type of bishop. But on this score he is right and needs all the help he can get. So let's dive into this story as we prepare for Lent. The state of the church in Germany is one thing that you and I could offer our Lenten prayers and penances for. The bishop in question is Cardinal Welki. If you're not familiar with him, Rainier Maria Welki is the Cardinal Archbishop of Cologne, where he was installed in September 2014 by Francis. Let's be clear on who we're dealing with here. This isn't someone with a history of defending orthodoxy like an Archbishop Lefebvre or, in our day, a certain auxiliary bishop from Kazakhstan, or, if you prefer, Archbishop Vigano. This is something else entirely. As I said Friday, this is the representative of Francis in the form of a Benedict-style bishop standing up against something that is just too much even for Rome, too much even for the modernists in the Vatican, so keep him in your prayers, please, for numerous reasons. On Twitter, Edward Penton summarized the article he wrote for the National Catholic Register this way, quote, "One German priest decried the contents of a synodal path document as a quote-unquote master plan for Protestantization of the Church, and said Catholics should quote-unquote wake up to what is currently brewing in Germany, otherwise we will have a Reformation 2.0. Penton rarely minces words, and he doesn't do that here. His piece in the Register tells a lot. The headline and deck read as follows, quote, "Is Cardinal Welki being targeted because of his concerns about German synodal path? Sources in Germany say that the campaign against Cologne's Cardinal Archbishop is aimed at removing him so that the synodal path can proceed without resistance. In other words, because he won't fall in line with the new movement, he has to go. Now think about what happens if they get their way. As you'll recall, one thing they want is the laity in charge of the appointing of bishops and priests to their various posts, and they want to expand ordination to include everyone that the city of Man, wants us to ordain. In this case, that also implies that the laity would be able to remove bishops from their posts too. That would mean that Cardinal Welki is likely at the top of the list of those who would need to be dismissed from their posts. Now, according to the article, much of this is being coordinated through the formal outlets, which in that country often include the secular ones reporting on church happenings. Their means of undermining the cardinal? Well, they say he didn't provide details about a, shall we say, McCarrick-type issue in his diocese. Whether that's true or not isn't really the issue here, at least it shouldn't be, though it should be addressed, obviously. And he himself admits that his release of information wasn't handled well, and asked in December for Pope Francis to look into the case for him. However, the timing of all this is suspect. Let's quote the piece from Edward Penton. Quote, "Sources within the Church in Germany, speaking to the Register on condition of anonymity, contend that the action against him is aimed at removing him, preferably before the report's release on March 18th, so that the synodal path can proceed without resistance. Indeed, the harsh criticisms of Cardinal Welki coincide with the resumption of the synodal path, a 2-year process that began in January 2020 to tackle quote-unquote key issues arising from the situation. Ostensibly with the aim of reforming the Church in Germany, critics say the process is more about bringing the Church into line with secular culture, notably regarding the 6th and 9th commandment, which I'll call the James Martin concerns, and power structures and other worldly issues, including expanded ordination. Among the critics of the German synodal path is Cardinal Gerhard Müller, the prefect emeritus of the Vatican's Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, who has characterized it as an attempt to quote-unquote correct the Word of God, end quote. That is a spicy, spicy little way Cardinal Müller has of describing it, correcting the Word of God. And yes, that is, however, the same Cardinal Müller who recently released 2 documents on the Francis versus Benedict question, and there is sort of a bit of irony in him saying something about correcting the Word of God, since he is a staunch defender of Vatican II. I do count him among the better bishops, but that allegiance to the council is breathtaking at this stage of things. But for those of you who said I was overreacting to this by saying this may lead to schism, the article reminds us that Cardinal Welki is the prelate who has been warning that schism and the forming of a national church in Germany might be the outcome of all this. Quote, Cardinal Welke, likewise, has been an outspoken critic of the path within the German hierarchy. In September, he warned that the quote-unquote worst outcome would be if the quote synodal path leads to schism, and that the worst thing would be if a German national church were to be created here. Much will depend on how the Pope decides to respond, but little seems likely to sway most of the German hierarchy and their allies who appear determined to push through the synodal path reforms. End quote. There's more to that article if you want. A link to it can be found as always in my show notes today on my website, returntotradition.org. It's not behind a paywall. Feel free to skip past the Patreon pop-up, and you'll see the entry for today's episode there. It appears, though, that there are two issues here that need to be addressed. First, by his own admission, Cardinal Welke did not handle the revealing of a McCarrick-type situation and information therein as he feels he should have. His colleagues and the servants of their father below in the secular opinion-making business certainly agree. Again, this is by his own admission, and it leads to the second problem. It gave the opponents of tradition and orthodoxy all the means they need to try to sideline him if he does not comply. He is an obstacle to be overcome or removed in their quest to craft the church in Germany into something that has more to do with the man of sin than it does our own blessed Lord. And there should be a lesson here that you must do your duty at all times. You never know when your failure to do so will come back to haunt you. A church that goes with the world is not one that will be filled with the grace of God, and that also should be obvious at this point. The Cardinal deserves credit for standing up for the faith in this time, but of course he may have inadvertently done those forces a favor by not doing what needed to be done in at least 2 cases of a McCarrick type. And that is, of course, what happens when either cowardice or something worse stays your hand from doing the right and just thing. I hope other bishops are taking notes here, because this synodal path in Germany is coming to a country near you, if it is permitted in that country. If they do go into schism, at least for now, the bishops of that country would still be successors of the apostles, though as soon as they expand ordination, that'll almost certainly cease. The church in Germany is in a dire state, and it is little wonder then that in Germany the traditional fraternities all have full parishes for Sunday Mass, whether it's the SSPX or FSSP or any other groups. In countries with these kinds of shepherds, the silly internal divisions and messages of suspect reporting organizations matter little when the integrity of the faith is at risk. That is something for us to remember as things move forward, because again, this is coming to a country near you. Now, what do you think of this? The faithful in Germany certainly could use your prayers. Francis has in the past told the Germans to stop with this, but yet they persist. Will we see the more aggressive version of Francis here act to defend his authority? Or is this part of something he actually wants? Let me know in the comments, and as always, pray for the Church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.